Hey everybody, Dan Lapel for New Focus Recordings, joined by a good friend, great composer Scott Miller, who's got a new project coming out with us on January 27th. Coincident. Hey Scott, how you doing?
Hey Dan.
Thanks for joining. And this one, I think, sort of merges a handful of things that you've been sort of getting your hands in for a while, in a way, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's sort of a culmination of a few different things that predate the pandemic that all kind of came together under those circumstances in a way that I didn't anticipate. I can say that.
Yeah, so like a big focus of this release is telematic music making, right?
Yeah.
So people making music together in real time, but doing it remotely through technological means. And I think a lot of people tried to sort of grapple with that conundrum during the pandemic. And I
Yeah.
know you and I did some playing like that.
Hmm.
And I feel like of the people that I did have a chance to do some of that with, you may have done the deepest dive on this, and and found the most creative and also integrated solutions. I thought so. Since a lot of people I think who might be watching this video may have actually tried to do some of that work by necessity and might still be doing it just because they found it sort of interesting, even
Hmm.
now that it isn't as necessary.
Yeah.
Maybe can you do a little bit of like a quick and dirty uh, sort of version of what you discovered and some of the solutions that you found to try to sort of smooth out the process of playing with people in real time over the computer?
Well, yeah. So finding the right software that gives you the kind of quality that you minimally require, but that also doesn't put up a lot of obstacles to a lot of different people with different kinds of comfort with technology. That was maybe job number one. And so the software that I ended up using is was written by Miller Puckett. It's called Netty McNetface and runs on Pure Data PD, which is his uh, sort of his object-oriented programming environment. Um, and and that really ticked a lot of boxes in terms of stability, ease of use, and comfort level, or sort of you know making an awful lot of musicians feel comfortable once we got things up and running. The other software that I've been using and continue to use is Jack Trip, which has a much, let's say, a greater sort of awareness in terms of brand awareness, but it's also uh, presents a lot of its own sort of technical challenges, and so two different tools, um, but they both address the same thing, which is how do we get high quality audio from two places on the earth that are far enough apart that even at the speed of light, it doesn't quite get there fast enough to seem like it's instantaneous, and that's latency. And so an awful lot of effort after about uh, March 2020 went into, people trying to solve that problem of latency. Uh, from a technical perspective. And while I benefited from that, my uh, choice was just to accept it, and to instead uh, find ways to explore musical expression that doesn't depend on our perception of things synchronizing in a rhythmically precise way, not in, at least not in terms of what we traditionally think of as synchronicity. And so that really shaped the aesthetic boundaries of the kind of music that I was making. And it also eliminated failure in terms of synchronicity. So it wasn't a frustrating experience when things from multiple sources happened in their own time. Uh, I just chose to embrace that.
Yeah. Uh, I think that's, I mean, that's an interesting component of this project. Now it's coming out now past the moment of necessity,
Right.
uh, but it's a reflection of the work that was done during a sort of moment that forced our hand in a certain way. Now that you have some distance on it, I'm interested in how you feel. Like, what would a piece look like that reflected some of the things that you discovered in working in this way, but you actually wrote for players to play in the same room? Or is that piece even possible?
Oh, it is. I mean, it's certainly informed by the tradition of music from the 50s and the 60s. I'm well, what comes to mind actually in a sort of an extreme way would be Henry Brandt's music with, multiple musical styles in the same space, but operating on completely independent uh, temporal uh, timelines and just sort of coexisting um, and so there's that whole tradition that was informing everything I did, and so to answer your question, it uh, would lean more into the free improv, at least in terms of the agency of a performer to decide, like, when am I going to make this sound, and whatever that sound is, it could be very precisely notated or it might be more open. uh, but I guess for me, it connects more strongly to the kind of improvisational music that I've been engaged with for so many years.
And it's interesting too because it's not. I mean, even though these pieces were recorded where people weren't in the same physical space, they are sharing some kind of space. By initiating the process of playing together over this somewhat more tenuous connection. There's a sense, and the feeling I got when we played together too, there is still that dialogue that's happening, when you're improvising together in the same room, but there's also, it's filtered through, I mean, I guess if you're wearing headphones, presumably all these musicians were wearing headphones so that you weren't
Right.
re-recording so you're in the headphones, you're relating to the other person's music as it's like filtered through the internet connection through the headphones. You're not, you know what I mean? It's it's still a real-time experience as a player, but you have all these other components that really make it distinct from actually being able to feel vibrations of another musician's instrument next to you in a room.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the history of network arts, um, what you're describing is the telematic space, or
Yeah.
this idea of telepresence, that there's this place that gets created that exists. It doesn't exist, but it does exist, right? Where we're all meeting, um, and and somehow interacting and creating a thing uh, in real time. But yeah, the mediation of the technology imposes its own kind of thumbprint on it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm interested in now, because you mentioned the headphones, is actually I'm having performers put speakers in the room with them, and sending some information over headphones and different musical information over the speakers, that then the microphone is picking up after it is interacting in their physical space. And
Yeah.
then that like actually influences the sound that comes out of a speaker in a different room in somebody else's studio. And so I'm trying to create this
Oh, that's very cool.
physical connection of the
Yeah, yeah,
sound.
yeah. And there's a
That,
sort of almost sense that the translation process becomes part of the sonic translation process as you're passing the sound from these different recording environments one to another. It becomes sort of part of the piece.
uh, well, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's almost like a Lucier trick.
for sure. That definitely informs it.
You should do a performance of I am sitting in a room in many different rooms in different locations.
I
If you do it,
should,
I want to be part of this.
okay, I'll look into that. Although I got to be honest, I kind of suspect somebody recently did.
Maybe, yeah.
But I'm gonna have to look into that. That's
Try
a
that.
great idea.
Uh, I'm also curious because I think you're still doing plenty of playing like this, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it we haven't done it since the lockdown.
Hmm.
How different does it feel now that it's I mean, obviously if you're doing it with you're probably not choosing to play this way with somebody who lives down the street from you. So you're still solving like a geographic proximity issue, but
Yeah, definitely.
also it's not the sort of larger specter of we can't none of us can play together in the same room is lifted. So now it's sort of like um it's a voluntary thing. You're deciding to make music in this particular way and choosing all the things that go along with it, in addition, presumably, to making music in a more conventional way with people in a room. Uh, and I'm just curious, does it feel that different, or it feels pretty much the same?
I just went to Europe to do some concerts with people in the same room who I'd been working with and continue to work with telematically, and
Yeah,
it is interesting. It surprisingly translates. There's a thing that's a little bit different when you're together in the room, uh, but it also at the same time there's this uh, just this incredible familiarity that I think reflects the actual musical bond that I have with these people that I developed over the past few years, even though it was uh, on a network.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but okay, so what happened is over the past year, really the urgency that a lot of musicians felt to somehow play, and therefore they were using um, software to try and do it telematically. um, that urgency has basically dissipated. And
Yeah.
so a whole lot of people who just sort of did it because that was all that was available are breathing a huge sigh of relief. We can do things face to face, and they're doing that, and that's fine. So that still leaves a whole huge cohort of people who weren't really doing it before, maybe not at all, who are now discovered that it's a really musically enjoyable thing. And so we're still doing the work. But the other thing I got to say that I've discovered is that with the real return of face-to-face concert experiences, musicians, you can't turn that work down, and it's just harder to schedule the
Yeah.
time, believe it or not,
Yeah.
to bring people together
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
to
No,
do it, which is
that makes sense.
it. I didn't anticipate that. That's honestly, that was kind of surprising that happened.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, let's talk about another sort of significant part of the this album that's sort of not exactly related to the telematic work, but isn't unrelated either, which is the graphic score pieces,
yeah.
right? And that's also something that you've been investigating for some time, I think, but maybe has gotten become a bigger part of your work in the last few years. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think anybody working with electronic sound uh, and human performers, that your notation ends up incorporating different kinds of graphic notation um, out of necessity. But the necessity that I felt in March and April and May of 2020 was just trying to figure out how to make music and interactive electroacoustic music, which is what I do. How to do it with the software, and how do I figure out what's possible in an efficient way. And so for me, uh, generating uh, a score using graphic notation and like really targeting the kinds of musical dimensions that were interesting to me. Like, okay, this is going to be a piece about dynamics, or this would be a piece about duration. Uh, I found that really leaning into graphic notation made it possible for me to to compose a lot of things much more quickly than I would have otherwise, and in a format that I could use with a huge variety of performers of different instruments. I didn't have to worry about register or range or anything like that. So because there's a lot of room for interpretation to fit it into the whatever the needs of an individual were on their instrument. And so that, frankly, has just kind of taken off, and um, I've really leaned into graphic scores and just coming out of that, even if I don't have to at this point.
Yeah, and one of these pieces, uh, Harvest,
Yeah.
has sort of an animation augmented reality component to it.
Yeah. So that graphic score, um, it only exists, if you will, in augmented reality when you run an app um, on iOS or Android, and when it was originally created and premiered in September, it was actually geolocated on a farm in Wisconsin. So the only place that you could see it is if you went to the Behringer family farm in Ellsworth, Wisconsin, and ran the app on your phone or your tablet and pointed it at this field in the farm, and then you could see the score.
Yeah.
Uh, and since then, uh, I've removed that geolocation restriction, and rebuilt the app, and added actually the telematics studio recording of Zeitgeist performing that piece. So you can now you can watch that graphic score and listen to the performance of it by Zeitgeist anywhere in the world, wherever you want to point your phone at.
That's very cool, and that's an app that is going to be made available to folks.
Yes,
We're gonna have a
exactly.
link on the New Focus album page. Uh, that's I mean that intersection is very cool, and of course on Raba you were
Right.
already exploring the virtual reality component with the headsets, and that was also very exciting. So I feel like each new project from that you bring that you send my way, I can always count on there being some sort of envelope pushing technological component attached to it, which is always really cool. And so kudos to you, Scott, for pushing the envelope out there in the heartland.
Oh,
I
well,
don't know. Are the Twin
thanks.
Cities the heartland? I guess.
Oh yeah,
I
this
know.
is this is this is right in the middle,
Yeah, right in the middle.
up north.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, but yeah. Well, so uh, I think unless you have anything else to say, I thought maybe I'd just give a shout out to some of the other folks involved on the record.
well, in fact, that's what I was going to say. That envelope pushing, um, man, it requires an awful lot of talented and patient collaborators,
Yeah, of
which
course.
uh, which we find on this recording, starting with Zeitgeist.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
The Twin Cities based ensemble that you've done quite a lot of work with, and they're really fantastic. Yeah. Um, this particular project was recorded, mixed, and mastered entirely by you, and you also did the
yep.
art and design, which looks great. Um, and uh, well, I guess I mean aside from that, we should just shout out St. Cloud State University Mid Career Grant, American Composers Forum, and McKnight Composer Fellowship Program. But other than that, this was like you are the production team on this record.
I had the time.
You had the time, yeah, which is awesome. Uh, well, hopefully folks can. Obviously, the point of these videos is to sort of give some background, and then go and check out the music and sort of immerse yourself a little bit in the fruits of this sort of labor by way of necessity that developed into something else, and now has sort of given you a platform and a forum to continue to collaborate with people who are far away, which is great.
It is. It is.
Very cool. Thanks for hopping on. Again, it's Scott Miller's Coincident. It's out on January 20th, FCR 27th, sorry, FCR 337. And hope to see everybody soon in real life. Take care.
Bye.